Did we make it?
Don't see anything yet.
Hmm? Hmm?
Oh, there we go.
There we are.
So,
Hey, everybody. Another Saturday stream here. Joined with a special guest, Dan. I don't know, Dan, if you want to introduce yourself.
well, okay. I never know what to say on that. You know, it's like
Take it.
I'm Dan. I'm Dan. You know, I mean,
Jump in.
yeah. So I'm just a Microsoft MVP. Work on Prism. Write a lot of code. Yeah. So that's basically, I guess, a little bit about me.
Put together the ZAM Dev Summit.
I did put together a ZAM Dev Summit, working on it for this year as well. So,
And you're going to tell us everything about it today, right? All the details, where it's at.
I would love to. I would love to. They're just, you know, there are a couple of like real life things that I have to deal with,
Sure.
revolving around it before I can make that. I would have liked to have made that announcement last month,
Sure.
but yeah. But as soon as I am able to, I will.
Okay, so like end of the stream, you should be good. Just kidding.
Probably not. No.
So this is awesome to have you here. Thanks for taking the time out to jump on here with me. I know we've been chatting about it a little bit back and forth, just, you know, because we, you know, obviously we're both working in the Xamarin world. We're both trying to stay up to date with all the new technology and stuff like that. So
Yeah, I think trying is the key word there, right?
yeah, it's nearly impossible. You know, it's always some amount of something going on.
Yeah.
And I know both of us recently have been looking a bit into Comet. Comet being, I guess, for anybody who's watching or is tuned into this, Comet is sort of a new UI framework in the Xamarin world. I would say more close. It's the MVU style pattern, so model view update. More closely patterned, I guess, if you're familiar with like Flutter, I would say it's pretty much in line with that. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
There's a better example, but
I'm not a Flutter expert by any means.
Yep.
So, but you know, I would kind of say from looking a little bit at Flutter, from looking at Comet, I would tend to say, you know, Comet is probably like the Flutter equivalent in C#, right? So, which gives you, I think, a lot of advantages working in C# and kind of having Xamarin as that backbone. You have all of the bindings, you have library support that just is there in Dart.
right. Yeah, I mean, that's like the big thing that always got me is, you know, when I saw Flutter coming around and stuff like that, I was pretty excited about it. I thought it looked pretty awesome. But then it's like, well, they've got this, you know, they've got Dart, which feels like bizarro C#, right? It's like, it reminds me of like, it's like TypeScript, you know, you're writing JavaScript, but clearly somebody has come, you know, across it with like the C# mindset and was like, you know, let's tidy this up here a little bit, you know, or whatever. So Dart feels a bit like that. And so, yeah, like, you know, and then for me, obviously, with working in C# for so long, just missing out on all the cool libraries, like the whole package management ecosystem and all the cool stuff that we have. It's like exciting. It's just like that dual-edged sword. It's like super exciting on the Flutter side of stuff, and it's cool, and the paradigm's cool, but then at the same time, it's like, well, I have to go and rebuild everything, which is like, I feel like the developers every 5 years paradigm, right? It's sort of like, hey, look at this shiny new thing. Let's move over to it immediately and just rebuild all the stuff that we've just been building for the last 10 years or whatever, 5 years or whatever it is.
Definitely.
Whereas,
I mean, for me specifically, it's like I moved out of web and to mobile because I was tired of framework of the week. You know?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. In the JavaScript world, it seems like that that changeover cycle's not like every 5 years or so. It's like every 50 minutes or so. You know, it's like, what's the cool new thing?
Yeah.
Oh, you're a toothless hillbilly if you're still using X, Y, and Z, kind of. You know, like why? How can you? How jQuery? Look at this. This person's a million years old. You know, like how could you still be using that type of thing? It's, you know, and I get it. Like, you know, obviously time moves quick and stuff like that. And in particular on the web, there's a lot more developers and stuff. So, but yeah, so it's exciting to see something like Comet here where it's that same, you know, and I did a stream of it like the other week, just kind of diving, you know, personally into it a little bit more. But it was like all that excitement that I've had of Flutter and some of these newer style technologies, having things like instant reload, or that kind of like that reload cycle in your UI that happens while you're still running the app. Just having some of the new like UI paradigms, in particular, having the ability, or having the Skia components as like a first class citizen, which for me, I've been working on like a controls library that is almost entirely built around Skia, and I've been working on that for like some time now.
Awesome controls library, by the way.
Appreciate it. But yeah, like just seeing that as like a built-in first-class citizen is extremely exciting. So I know it's like everything it's the best of everything I would want in my world, which is pretty cool. And I know you probably took it even one step further than me. And where I was still kind of like starstruck looking at it, playing around with it, you actually started building some things.
Yeah. So, I mean, kind of the funny thing, you go way back, and I know you saw it previously, but I had the tooling for Visual Studio for Mac, and people have been begging me to bring that back.
Sure.
And which I totally
get. It's easy to maintain, though, right?
Oh God, it's a nightmare to maintain. And so if I'm going to bring that back, and I actually am working on bringing that back, there were some fundamental changes I needed to make, especially to make this where I can also bring it to Visual Studio on Windows. And so I had kind of sought, like, what can I do to have my UI be as similar as possible between the two? And so I started looking at some different options that were out there. I'd been using XWT, which is kind of like the Grand Xamarin Forms.
Right.
It's terrible. Don't go out and use it, but it is there. And so I really wanted to get away from XWT. There were some just really bad things around that. And so I started looking at Comet and talking to Clancy. And Comet really has the promise, especially with the Skia being built right in. That's going to give me exactly what I've been looking for in my code reuse and having a beautiful UI. And so that's kind of what brought me here. But of course, knowing me, right? Like, I love DI. And you cannot do IDE tooling without dependency injection. It just does not happen. So I needed something that I could kind of work on, on top of everything that Comet has natively. So I started, trying to figure out some little lightweight framework. For obvious reasons, I have certain inspirations.
Sure. I mean, it makes sense. I don't know if we mentioned it yet, but for anybody, who doesn't know, I know you're one of the primary maintainers on the Prism project. So, having that whole code base, having years and years and years worth of time in there for building out, one of the most popular MVVM frameworks, it would be silly to not use in some inspiration there, I would say, right?
Yeah. I mean, I would say that good code, it tends to be at least inspired, if not outright stealing other.
Sure.
But in any case, so I have some basic things in there to help me with my dependency injection, to help me with my navigation, so kind of thing. I wanted to bring that up, where we can kind of go through it. How do you?
Yeah, I'm just trying to get the simulator up and running here, but I could probably just jump over to code.
Sure.
Like I had mentioned earlier, I've got, I might have to just figure out a different way to share. It's hilarious. I've got my simulator working. I could see it. The app's actually running. Oh, wait, hold on. The Windows has other aspirations about what it wants to do with it. There it goes. Cool. I think I'm just pushing this Mac to its max here. So sweet, yeah. Sorry, go.
You mean you didn't get the new 16-inch? What?
I've got the 2018 maxed out version. I'm gonna throw not sponsored by this company, but there is a a cool website called Swappa. I don't know if you've ever heard of it before.
No, I haven't.
If you are a mobile developer, it is an awesome site actually. So Swappa is just a place where you could go. It's like Craigslist or eBay or whatever, but it's all geared around like electronic devices. So it's like phones and laptops and all that kind of good stuff. And so like as a mobile developer, that's how we actually went to this site to begin with. But as a mobile developer, it's awesome because like, you know, when the new iPhones come out, as developers, we need to get our hands on something or whatever, you know, just to be able to test with that hardware. But buying like an iPhone, whatever, is cost prohibitive. And so what you could do is like on Swappa is usually like whenever the new iPhone comes out, you can get the last gen ones for like in particular for one of the like carriers that has like the no SIM card or a SIM card lock-in. So like Verizon or Sprint. I can't remember which one of those two. I don't think you get a SIM card with. Like the prices on phones there are insanely inexpensive because you can't get rid of them. You know, it's not like GSM or something where somebody who's got T-Mobile or AT&T could just pick up that phone and use it. And so we always buy all of our devices on there. In any case, they also have, you could get like MacBooks and stuff like that. So I always do the thing of, I don't want to make like generalizations, I guess, but like Apple people seem to be okay with spending large sums of money at the drop of a hat. That seems to be true for.
I think that's a fair assessment. Yeah,
it seems to be true for iOS, like for iPhones and for Apple like devices, like you know, like a MacBook or something like that. So, in any case, like once the new 2016 got announced, I went and bought my new laptop now, which is just the 2018 or 2019 MacBook Pro, all maxed out, but at like a third of the retail price. Still has like 3 years worth of Apple Care on it. I think it had, when I got this one, I want to say it had 13 cycles on the battery, which is like insane. It's basically brand new. So, shout out to Swappa. If you want to sponsor me, I'm cool with that. But you don't have to because I'll continue to use your service because it's a great place to go and buy this stuff. And it's all the nice thing too is it's all verified. So like they'll double check to make sure it's not like stolen or you know something weird like that. So.
Yeah, I had just picked up a new MacBook Pro in August, and I'm like, okay, they released a new Mac, might as well go get it because they're not doing another one for a year.
Totally.
2 months later, I'm like, oh well.
Yeah, it's hard to gauge that stuff sometimes, you know, but like, yeah, man, that's my recommendation. That's what we've been doing as a company for a few years now is just wait for the next big release and then just buy whatever's old, barely used garbage.
Yeah, definitely. That's a good idea.
Cool. Let's see. So I've got this up and going here. So yeah, I don't know do you want to, I know we kind of talked about it a little bit here, but this is the Hailbop project that you were mentioning out there. So this is some of that like navigation DI plugin components for the Comet framework. I mean, if you want to give it I'm sure you could give it a far better intro if you'd like.
Yeah. So, well, and I will say I actually did make it public here this morning, so people can go and check it out on GitHub. So just go to Dan Siegel, and it's the Hailbop repo there. So, in any case, so like if we kind of go into the source a little bit, I got to look at the source myself here. There's no, like, I haven't done anything crazy like we have in Prism as far as like container abstraction. Like I'm just using dry IOC just to make it really simple. It's really very kind of lightweight, where, you know, I'm not taking too much of an opinion about where you need to implement stuff, but I have some helpers there for navigation, the same as Prism would, where you can confirm, you know, can I actually navigate away from this view to my next view? If you want to, you know, pass parameters, through your navigation. You can do that.
Nice.
Which is, I think, pretty cool, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And so you can pass those parameters in your navigation, and you can set that in on navigated to, on navigated from kind of style, which is pretty helpful. You get all the query string support that you would have in Prism, so you can, you have full URI based navigation, which is really awesome.
So where would be the best place to start in here if we were to kind of jump in and just sort of take a look, like one level deeper? Would it be the Comet host, do you think? Or is that a lot of unimportant nonsense?
Let me take a look at that myself here.
You got it.
So yeah, there's just a lot of,
I'm sure there's a lot
behind
of
the scenes. There's a lot of behind the scenes stuff, in the Comet host there. But so basically, from a platform agnostic level, there's just this platform, or the Comet host that it's, I'm trying to think how to explain, but we do all of the common setup for the framework, right? But there are certain things that we need to know at a platform level. I can't, in net standard, I can't go and figure out, how to take this Comet view and set that as my root view controller in the window, right? So I need some iOS code in there that's going to be able to take that, and when I say, hey, this is my root view, we're going to go and deal with that at the platform level. So there are those types of abstractions in here,
and even stuff like I could see here. There's this without fast expression compiler, which I assume has to be some dynamic code generation stuff that we just can't do on iOS, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Learned that one the hard way.
Shit, while shipping an application, I'm guessing, or when it came to release build time.
So we actually did an update for Prism, and without knowing, we were okay, we'll update dry IOC, whatever, and didn't even realize that he put in this new fast expression compiler, which was on by default in the container, which is great, but it's using things that aren't allowed on iOS. So
hey, everyone's building desktop apps, right? So it's totally fine there. I mean,
yeah. I probably should also add that for Android, because if you are doing AOT, probably blow up there as well. But hey, this is an early build. What do you want from me? But yeah, I mean, it really does speed it up. But whatever.
And then really quick, it looks like we had a question here. What is fast expressions? I assume so. I could probably give a quick overview, but I assume that the expressions here in this case would be something where you provide in a lambda, and maybe something that says here's my object, and then look at this object's property or something like that, and then it builds an expression off of that. It builds an expression off of that lambda. So it says hey, then I could listen for this particular property and pass it its value in from one place to another, or use it to listen for, for example, in reactive UI, we use expressions quite often to set up property observables. So you could say hey, listen to this property, and if this object does iNotify property changed, send these notifications through down the line. The thing about expressions, though, depending on how you build them, is that they do use reflection, so they are a little bit slower from that perspective. And also, I'm guessing probably specifically with this one, without knowing, you probably know a little bit better than I do here. You can do some work to pre-compile them, but it's going to require that there's some work. At runtime, essentially, it's going to require that some new objects or some new code gets generated with it. So those, which isn't going to be allowed in the iOS or the AOT world for Android as well. So that's what those expressions do. I could probably pull up an example, or maybe there's even an example in some of the code here if we get to it. I'm not sure if there would be, but I could probably show it off. I don't know anything that I missed with that seems wrong or crazy.
No, I mean, I think there probably is some example up on the dry IOC GitHub as to like why it's faster. But yeah, no, I think you basically covered it. I would say from just keeping it high level, not getting into the nitty gritty. Yes, it is reflection. There are pieces of reflection that work in the AOT world, and there are pieces of reflection that only work when you're jitting.
Yep.
So
if you're if you're just checking out to see like, hey, does this property exist on this object, and does it have these properties? That's usually just fine in the reflection world, But if you're using reflection to say like, hey, inject this in here or generate something new that doesn't currently exist, that's when it's lights out. So.
Yeah, they don't like generating code.
Unfortunately, it would be awesome. We would be able to do so many other cool things, but someday maybe.
Yeah. Well, and I've kind of been toying with the idea of experimenting with this on some future stream. But like basically everything that enables hot reload, really, and also with the hot restart now as well. I've kind of been tempted to look at this for like an enterprise application where you're staying away from the store, like because Prism has the whole concept of modules. But what if you don't want to ship certain modules for certain types of users with your app? And so now because like in WPF land where we don't have all these issues, you can dynamically download modules at runtime, and then they get loaded once they're downloaded, right? So it'd be fantastic if we could do that kind of thing, or you could run updates on a module at runtime on an enterprise app.
Absolutely. Like that's most of our clients are like in the enterprise world, and getting a new app pushed is almost as painful as going through like the Apple process. You've got MDM software, which is like enterprise app distribution software. You've got corporations, which usually are not super cool on changes, so like pushing out an app update to X amount of employees is bad, but if you could streamline it through like an API or something like that, it would be it all of a sudden becomes like a non-issue, so yeah, having something like that would be awesome. I would love, if you do something around there, please do let me know. I would love to see that.
Yeah. No, it really has a lot of potential, but I think it would be one of those features that would be very, very limited to enterprise world only, So, anywho, so where were we?
Sure. Well, I was just thinking about it too. Would it make sense to take a look at the sample app and kind of drill through it that way?
Let's do that.
Is it better to start with the iOS app, or do you think it'd be better to start out here with the shared code?
Let's start in the app delegate. Sure. And we can see how crazy the app delegate is.
So I do love this. Like, this is one of the things, and looking at your code and how you have this set up, and even just how Comet is set up by itself, in comparison to something like Xamarin Forms, this is extremely simplified. Like this is your finished launching is, 3 lines of actual code, which is incredible. And the first line of code obviously is just for Comet. That's just it starting up and just telling the debugger to listen for changes and things like that. And then you've built this thing here that is the start method.
Well, it's not even really for Comet. I mean, that first line is literally just the hot reload initialize, right? It's like, hey, I'm going to be developing. I want hot reload. I don't want to have to redeploy every time. So if you're fine going stop, okay, run, then you don't even need that line.
I'm not
right?
fine doing that anymore. After doing this, I'm not fine going back to that world. But yeah.
I'd rather shoot myself, but
And then you've got this pretty cool thing here then. So you've got this start method, and if you notice up here too, you've got a custom application delegate, right? So yeah, I don't know if you want to describe those or talk over those a little bit.
yeah. So basically, the custom application delegate just simplifies things a little bit for you. Um, you know, people are used to that whole finished launching method, right? Like this is where I'm going to initialize everything. I didn't want to complicate it, so I just exposed a very simple start method there. So all you need to pass into it is your application delegate and zoom a little bit.
Sure. Oh yeah, you know what? It zoomed out on me. Sorry about that. Yeah, let me switch. Oop. We'll do. Maybe.
You're in developer mode, not streamer
I know.
mode, right?
I did it on one. Sorry, that's my fault. I did it over here, but I didn't do it, or I did it on one of the projects, but not this one. So there we go. Should be better now. Sorry about that.
So you pass in the application delegate, you pass in a URI. You can also pass in some navigation parameters, which I'm not doing here. It's just a sample at the moment. But yeah, I mean, it's intentionally simple.
So like
if you go to the Comet app, and we can actually take a look at what's going on in there. And we look at the overloads there for the start.
In the app delegate for, I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry. Well, I was actually looking at your stream where you have the delay. But anyway,
you want me to go to the start itself?
But no, go to the Comet app. Go to the Comet app.
Sure. There.
Yeah. So in the Comet app, we have just a very simple register method, right? And so we're setting up a couple things. Again, this is kind of early. At some point, I'll make it a little bit more complex. But for right now, we're just registering a couple of views for navigation. So we just have that view A, view B. So it's just an extension method on the container that kind of handles a little bit of additional wiring up beyond, hey, I want to register this for dependency injection. Technically, the beautiful thing about dry IOC is it'll resolve any concrete type. So technically, if I say resolve view A, it's going to resolve view A.
Right.
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't have to be an interface or something like that. You could just say, here's view A, and it will know how to go and pick it up then.
Exactly. So, but we're kind of doing a little bit behind the scenes just to kind of make it easier. And that really, I mean, that's it. But I mean, you could register all of your services here, everything that you would normally do in an app.
And I know, like here, similar to like we have with a lot of dependency injection frameworks. So here, you're just saying, here's view A, right? Register view A and set it up with dependency injection. And the part that's cool then is if we were to take a look at view A, we could see that its constructor out here actually takes in this navigation service. And so even though we didn't have to declare that or do anything with that on the Comet app startup, the rest of the framework will basically see that, say, oh, it's an interface as part of the constructor. I know I need to pass something in, and it will go find a registration for that navigation service and then make that available to us, right?
Yep. So, one of the other things that I've kind of done in kind of making this a little bit better in some respects than Prism is I've added support for scoping. So every view is individually scoped. So that navigation service, if you have a scoped service that you've registered, you could pass in the navigation service to it. And so you can have some other service that, when something happens, like you hit log out, like your authentication service could go, okay, you said log out, now I'm going to call the navigation service to go back to the login again.
Right. It's pretty sweet.
So you can, so you can do all of those kinds of things, which is really awesome. But one of the things, I mean, in this sample, I think, let's see, I think I have everything initialized actually at the moment, but what it would do is, like, let's say that that state object, my binding object there, was not actually set. Like it was a null value
Yeah.
after the constructor finished. It'll actually go through and do property injection on anything that is a state, like anything that has a state attribute or is of type state or state of type T, where T is not, some sort of, primitive value like an int or a bool or something like that.
So would that be kind of, if I stub this out here, so if I had something that was like prop and I'll just say like state of, I think it's like string, for example, right? We'll call it a title. It's maybe not the best. Yeah. And then does it have to have the attribute on it then as well?
No.
No, it just has to be just of type state.
Yeah. So for like one of the things in Comet is anything that is like stateful like that needs to be private and read only.
Oh, okay.
And I believe there's actually like a build test that Clancy has in there that'll like fail the build.
Wait, are you serious?
I think so,
gotcha.
yeah.
So it can't even really be like a property. We'll have to have something a little bit more like that, right?
Yeah. So like it's one of those things where it gets really fun, and luckily this is one of the reflection things that we can do.
Sure. I was going to say, how can you actually get this assigned out here? Because with it being read only, it needs to be set as part of the constructor, right? Or it needs to be set at that time, or at object construction, right?
So there are only two ways that you can set something that's read only: in the constructor, or through reflection.
Sure.
I mean, it's intentionally much more difficult.
Sure. Yeah. I mean,
reflection. like you have to very purposefully do it, which is, I think, probably a good thing.
Yeah, you just don't want people willy-nilly getting in there and changing your read-only objects, because I feel like that kind of goes against the grain of what they're there for.
Yes, exactly.
That's pretty cool, though. So then, like you're saying, so it can actually resolve these, figure it out, and then get that value assigned out here as well. Is that, just for my fascination, is that something where you could set like a URI parameter as part of your navigation and have those get assigned, or how would it figure those out, I guess?
What do you mean? For like,
could I?
You're saying like,
oh yeah,
like have like a. You're saying like where, and I think Clancy was actually kind of doing this in his stream yesterday, where he had like a path where it was like,
equals type of thing.
Like it's that whole like RESTful URI, right?
Yeah.
Where you have the parameters as part of the URI. So that's not actually something that I'm supporting right now. It is a very interesting concept.
Yep. Way more difficult. Like I would never imagine that really to be there, unless you were able to borrow it from like something else. But that's way more difficult.
I mean, I would say it would be a really cool enhancement to make on this for sure. And I wouldn't be opposed to it outright, but I'd really have to see some interest for it, because that would be some work to do.
for sure.
So I'm trying to think what else here. So this sample is like, it's still very, very early. It's kind of why I've had it private, is because, not everything is working, obviously. But it is something where, like, let's say that, your my binding object, you wanted some sort of control, like you want to be able to block navigation away from this. Like, I mean, maybe let's take a login view as a sample, right? So like this is a login model instead, and so you have like a username and password. So you could actually implement your I confirm navigation on your login model, and you could say that, hey, we cannot navigate away from this if the username and password are null. Right? If they don't pass your validation, right? And so you could do that, and now when you try to navigate to some other page, it's going to check on your login model, the same as it would like a view model or the view in MVVM world, right? So we can actually check on that model whether or not we can navigate away. And you could also do that on the view as well. So if you wanted to, depending where you want to put the logic.
Which is awesome, because yeah, I mean, if we think of, if I put like my MVVM hat on, it's like all business, all logic for everything must be in the view model, right? And then if I put my like, I'm an actual developer who has to get stuff done hat on, it's like, well, some stuff's probably going to bleed out a little bit here and there, and it would be cool if that happens, at least, where I have the ability to have those options and at least to work with something in an abstract way. So I'm not like, oh, call this thing that's very specific, platform specific or something like that. But if I could interact with it, whether it's on my model side or my view side, and I'm still using it in an abstract way, it still will, I still can get my thing done. But I'm still following good or better practices in that I can still write unit tests around this thing or potential UI tests around this thing and inject in at that test time what I would actually need. But it's not so rigid where it's like, no, it must be this. And if you don't do it here, you're an awful human being and we're not even going to give you that option. Right. Which is cool because like I was saying, because it's many times what happens is you're like, even if it's awesome, like 99% of the time you get away, again, like in that MVVM world of putting stuff in the view model, but you always hit some edge case where you're just like, I got to break out of it for this one weird interaction or something like that, so having that ability to do that's pretty awesome.
Yes, I don't know what you mean at all.
Dan, you keep everything in the view model, right? It never bleeds over to the mobile project, right?
I would say I probably do a better job than most developers of keeping things in the view model. But like I see some crazy things, and I'm sure you do too, honestly. But you're like, why are you even doing this? Like, I always
find myself like nowadays, whenever I have to do that change, where I'm like, okay, I'm gonna have to do something a little gross. I always end up then myself building some other interface to like inject in, because then I'm like, well, I feel a little bit less bad about this if I have to like inject this in somehow to have it do the communication. Like, at least I'm invoking the communication from the view model maybe and expecting a response back, as opposed to just directly feeding something in or doing something that, if you ever have like a view model and you're referencing stuff from Xamarin Forms in it, you've like done something wrong. Like if your view model knows about the platform it's running on, with some exceptions, obviously if you're doing some other stuff or things like that, but like by and large, if your view models know about the platform that they're running on, there's probably an opportunity to do something a little bit cleaner architecturally there, right?
Yeah, I mean, I guess like I'm okay with, if you're trying to go, hey, am I running on iOS or Android, because I might need to do something a little different there.
Yep.
Like I'm cool with that in the view model, because you're not really implementing platform specific
even
code.
That's can be abstracted away. It's just like that's just like a state check more than anything, right? Yeah.
Exactly. You're just like, hey, what's my current runtime? Like, oh, okay, right. Like that.
But if you're like new up a UI button for iOS, that's when you've maybe gone a step too far.
No, that's when I start throwing up violently and. But this is actually one of the nice things, like in Prism world, and it's not utilized nearly enough. But you have the iEvent aggregator.
Oh, sure.
So it's really easy to use that iEvent aggregator to do the whole pub sub event right from your view model to the view and say, hey, go do this, or so you can just send events back and forth if you need to. I find that helps, but people don't really use it or think about it.
I told you there are so many features in the reactive UI world where I'm always like, check this out. And even like my developers who've been working on this stuff for years are like, the hell is that? Where did that come from? I'm like, it's always been there, or whatever. It's been there for a while, y'all. So.
Well, it's funny. So I'm actually I did the stream the other day with Shane on Shell for Prism, and I was kind of going through and cleaning up some stuff for Shell and Prism, and I came across this API that was in there. I was like, what the hell is this? And I looked, I'm like, oh, that solves the issue of custom naming for auto-registered views. I totally forgot I put that in there. I didn't doc.
And you had written it?
I wrote
hilarious.
it. I'm the one that wrote it. You know,
those are always
forgot,
the ones. Yeah.
Forgot it was in there.
There's not a lot you can point a finger with on that one. You know.
I was like, I was thinking I needed to add this actually, so this is fantastic. It's already there. I don't have to do anything.
Those ones are hard to point a finger on.
I laugh at myself though. It's
at the end of the day, what else can you do? You know.
Yeah, for sure.
So yeah, so I know there's some other features in here that you've been able to bake in as well too, right? So we've got like some of the cool stuff, so like some of this navigation stuff and the dependency injection I think is really cool. And then you've got a few other pieces out here as well. Like I know you've got some logging components.
Yeah. So there is, I would say logging in a very generic way.
Totally. And that's the right way that it should be, because just like dependency injection, everybody has their own logging. Whatever instrumentation and logging means to them is different depending on who you talk to,
Exactly. So what I try to do is just give you an interface that, gives you some power, right, to things that you might need to do. And also I wanted to try to keep it where we more closely matched things like if you were using Application Insights or App Center or something, because this is a mobile framework, more or less. Right? It's a little harder, I think, in some respects to say that with Comet than with Xamarin Forms. Like Xamarin Forms is absolutely mobile-centric,
right.
But I mean, Clancy already has like WPF and like all these.
It's kind of incredible. Like every time I look at it, I'm like, I don't even think that platform was supported last time I looked, and he's already got all this stuff built out for it, and I'm sure he's able to borrow some from forums just to kind of get like a head start on it. But still, that's pulling in a framework is not a trivial thing, So
No, it's not. Actually, and this was one of the cool things I thought with like everything that Clancy is doing is he's not taking this rigid approach. Like in Xamarin Forms, it's like we need to build, XYZ. It doesn't matter if somebody has already done something, like they're going to do it themselves. And with everything Clancy is doing, he's saying, you know what, FF image loading is awesome, and I don't want to write all of that, so I'm just going to take a dependency on it.
Sure, right, yeah. Why rebuild it, And especially where that project is right now, with Comet still being like the proof of concept phase and stuff like that, why wouldn't you just pull in things today that are awesome and work well? In worst case scenario, what you do is you just unpack it later on, right? Okay, maybe we won't want to use FF image loading, but maybe we take concepts from it and pare it down to be a little bit more lightweight, or like very similar like what you have with this logging interface. Maybe you could build some kind of image loading interface and then inject in FF image loading or some other library if you need to,
Yeah, but I mean, it really is kind of like the approach of how you take, what is it? Maybe two. Like I think it's what is it? John and Clancy are like the two guys primarily working on it, right? And neither one of them is doing it full time.
Right.
I mean, it's really like a full time or a part time thing. But that's how you take two guys that are doing it part time, and you get
scale that out.
Like you get like this incredible development cycle. And then you look at like Xamarin Forms, where it's like, I joke, I'm like, I did a PR for Hacktoberfest, but still hasn't been reviewed.
But it's like that inverse though. Like, and I'm sure Prism's the same way, and I know like a lot of like our projects and stuff like that. At the beginning of a project, you can get so much velocity because nothing has a dependency on it, and like nobody's using this. Who cares?
That's
just
true.
Rip with it and go. And then as like a project matures and stabilizes, and you're like even if you have like that awesome PR and it solves problems, like, but does it make something else weird? Like could breaking this, it's like a series of like light switches or something. It's like, or like toggle switches. You're like, well, I could flip one of these, but I'm not sure what's going to happen on the other end of it. Right. You know? So it's like, but yeah, like the forums, there is a forums team working on that stuff. And I know sometimes it feels like we got to get those changes out there, but you can't, you know, because priorities are who knows, right? You know, but like just once something gets so big, it becomes hard to move. But it's exciting to be at this phase, like especially now with like it's like it with Comet. It's super exciting to be like here now with it because we're still at that early phase where stuff is moving and shaking quite a bit, you know.
Definitely. So anyway, but yeah, I guess going back to the, like we're really bad at like staying focused, right? Like I know I am.
Yeah, well, it's fine. This isn't anything serious.
I'm constantly like squirrel, you know. Anyway, so yeah, so on the logging, you know, there is the console logger. You have a null logger that goes to nothing. But you know, it's just enough, you know, so you have the ability to also like, and this is one of the other things is I always hated, you get like this log method, like you know, you might see something like void log, and then you have like a category or something like that, right? And then you know you have the string for the message, and now it's like why do I have to specify what the level is every single time?
Right.
It's a lot more to write out, and so I didn't want to do that in here. You know, I wanted to just make it very explicit, like, is your intent to debug? Is it, you know, info warn? And then you can, or is it just a generic log message, right? And so that way you can actually, you know, more explicitly figure out the rules about when you want that message to appear. You know, is this something that, like maybe you use, you know, system diagnostics debug write line for your debug, and that way only the developer ever sees it. Right. And when you hit a release build, it's never going to go to the console.
Right.
So you know, you can figure out some different things there. Maybe if you have like a warn, maybe you go to the console and you go up to App Center, right, or something like that. So you can really kind of get creative in your rules of how you want your loggers to be, which I think will help people quite a bit.
Let me see. I'm just checking the chat. Joe Amazing. Let me know. I made a change to the audio. Let me know if it's any better. If you hear like a double audio there still. I don't know if it still happens. We'll see how that goes.
You can hear my mic about a half second before I hear the audio. Oh boy. I wonder if refreshing the stream would help. I've seen that with Twitch, where like the audio video gets out of sync.
It seems good on my side, but I can't guarantee that. It sounds good on the stream. I could let's see here. Let's see. I'll do. I'm gonna do this really quick. Hold on. This might get bad.
Rather muted, huh? Here, I can try moving the mic. I don't know if this will make it any better.
I think it's muted. Let me see. I'll try. I'm gonna crank it up. Hopefully Dan's louder now. There we go.
Well, I can talk. Well, I can talk louder too.
No, don't do that.
I mean,
I'm just kidding. No, I'm gonna turn you up. I'm gonna boost it on my side. It could just, again, so like for anybody who's watching, I've got this running through some software on my Mac called OBS, which is awesome and is incredible technology, quite honestly, and for free software, it couldn't be any cooler. But it's got a couple of weird things with it where, like getting, and this is more Mac stuff. Just getting the audio kicked out and things like that is a little bit awkward. So, hopefully it's better. Hopefully we get it figured out here. Yeah. So doing our best. We are not professionals at this. Dan is more than I am.
Yes. I wouldn't go that far. I wouldn't go that far.
Semi-pro.
Yes.
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 So yeah, so we can get back to this. Sorry, yeah. So a couple of quick diversions.
Yeah, no worries. Actually, let's take a look at the navigation service. Like, I forget all the cool stuff I write sometimes.
Going to the service itself or the interface?
Yeah, the interface. Yeah, the interface for the iNavigation service. So one of the things I actually wanted to do here was just kind of make it a little bit easier to use in some respects. So it's a void rather than async, which I know people get all like, I want async code. And that's okay because there's actually a bunch of extensions that kind of wrap around this. So if you want, I didn't want to take that opinionated, you have to be async in the first place. Like, I wanted you to just say, hey, navigate and then go do whatever. But if you want async, there is actually like an async extension on this as well.
Nice. And is that based off of the callback executing or something like that to provide that async functionality, or?
Yeah, exactly. So there is a like a task completion source that when the callback comes back, it sets the result of the task, and nice. There you go. So actually, if you want to open up the extensions, we can kind of take a look at that too.
Is that this one here?
I think I can't really see for here.
So navigation service extensions?
Yes.
Cool.
That's it. So while the navigation service interface itself was really basic, what I kind of chose to do was make it where it was just wrapped by extensions, because it's a lot less to implement.
Totally.
And I know it's a crazy idea, but
I'm into this. I do the same type of stuff all the time because, like, just to kind of point it out, your actual interface itself is, more or less dead simple, right? URI, parameters, and do a thing. And now, for what you need to expose, your top level, what you need to build out, super easy. So if somebody else needs to come in and build their own navigation service or whatever, there's not a whole lot of moving parts.
It's a single method that they actually have to implement if they wanted to write.
And you don't, and that's the thing, because like even if, say, I was like, oh, you know what, I really want this, like you're saying, like somebody wants this thing to be, task of navigate. Oops, I must have insert. Now, even this alone becomes far more difficult, because what does this mean in this context? Like, what does the task return mean? Or, like, is it, likely it would probably change this to be something like this, right? Now you have to, on all these platforms or, anywhere you want to build out this interface, you have to build out this whole implementation here. Whereas, like, with your service extensions, let me see if I'm losing like. Visual Studio's having a stroke here. But in your service extensions, there we go. You could just have that one implementation, and then I love this type of stuff, like using the task completion source. You could hide away, using all the cool bits that we have with .NET. You could hide this implementation away or sort of extend it out later on. And even give other people the ability to extend it out themselves later on if they need to as well. So the interface stays nice and clean. And then you get all these like cool bolt-on pieces that you could put on that don't require a ton of overthought. So yeah, I love that design. I think that's really cool.
Yeah. So it really does like it. And you have a lot of options. There are a lot of overloads here. If you want to be async, if you don't want to be async, and it's really only something that you can do when you take the approach of, I want to not have it async first. Like it's much harder to take this async API and then make it like kind of
take your like task returning method and now make it synchronous. Right. Good luck. I mean, It's the blessing and the curse of task returns. It's phenomenal for a million reasons, but then for the reason of once you add it in there, it's task in async. It's tasking all the way down once you put it in. So all the way down and all the way back to the beginning. So yeah, no, I love this. I think it's a really cool implementation there.
Yeah. Let's see here. And you do have this navigation exception as well, which is kind of an idea that I brought into Prism as well. That there are certain things that occur in navigation that you just want to know, like what is it that happened, right? Like, and if you just get like some random exception that gets thrown, it can be really difficult to figure out what exactly happened. And so, like, even with the navigation extension or exception, there are some constant strings that you can check for. So, and the whole idea is to make it obvious, right? So if the exception message is, view cannot navigate, well, then that you returned false from I confirm navigation, right?
And this would be like that example you gave earlier of like the authentication screen or something like that. You clicked login or something like that, but we told you, no, you can't do it right now, right?
Exactly. So that, there was this exception that was thrown, but it wasn't like anything critical. It was just that your own code said, no, you can't navigate. Right. And so you can react in your code to that. So I think that makes it a lot easier to handle. Or if the view is not registered, right? Like you're sitting there scratching your head, like, why isn't it? Well,
that's never happened before. Well, I know I clicked this button. Why aren't I going to this next page, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So if you forgot to add the registration, now you have a very simple exception message to kind of tell you that. And I'll add more, obviously, as I run into different use cases. But that's kind of like just the basis of to set this up to make it much easier to check for.
Yeah, no, I think that's super cool.
Yeah, and then for right now, like the sample, we only have the iOS app, but I still wanted to make it very easy for people to implement this. And so there's just this iRoute navigation controller, and that's actually one of those things that got passed in to the Comet host on the start method. And for that, like if you want to add support for WPF right now, even though that's not something I'm working on, you can add your own implementation of iRoute navigation controller for WPF. And now you have support for that platform.
And if we look at like the iOS implementation, for example, I know, like down here, right? You've got the Comet view controller. Which is like for the Comet side, it's just the wrapped view controller that has some stuff that the Comet platform needs to know on it. But then we get to slap on that iRoute navigation controller. And so, like what you're saying there is, here's the iOS version, but yeah, if you want to do UWP or Blazor or whatever it is, like some other framework, it's really just figuring out, hey, what's the native component that I need to do, and then we'll tack on essentially this piece to provide the bridge back to the native component.
Yeah, and it, like I said, it's very simple. So like for the Hailbop view controller that I've implemented there. All we're doing is we're explicitly implementing the iRoute navigation controller and just passing in the value to the Comet view controller's current view, because it's already being tracked in Comet. So we're hooking it up. Like, how do we get this back and forth? And that very, very simple. And then there's also the Hailbop activity that kind of does the same thing. Just to kind of keep it very simple.
Yep. So then conceptually the same, right? Just passing it in. And again, like we've got the Comet activity, which comes from the Comet framework. And then we just need to figure out like, hey, where do I need to glue this view to on the native component, which would be the page component of the Comet activity.
Yeah. So, and there was a different stage of the caffeine cycle that Clancy was in when he did Android versus iOS. And so it's page here instead of current view.
I noticed that, and I was just thinking in my head, I was like, I wonder if there's a reason why these are different, but then it's the same property type, so I don't know. Yes, I think the caffeine cycle is probably the right one. This is 100% something that I would do too, because there's so much terminology that's interchangeable, and especially I wonder which one of these was written first and written second, because my gut feeling, this is probably wrong, is that current view would be second, because this feels more generic. Like current view is more like, I don't know, it's just a view, whereas page feels like a thing. It's like a more concrete thing. So I feel like that's where I would have gone first, and then would have been, I don't know, it's more like a view, because it's really not a page on this platform or whatever,
Like, I don't know, because Clancy had told me that he was working on iOS first, and like it's more like the first class citizen than Android.
That always seems to be the case. I wonder why.
It probably has nothing to do with the fact that Android is a terrible operating system. But
I'm a Pixel user. I've used Pixel phones and Android phones since the beginning. It's like,
hey, I've got my Android phone right here, and I've got my iPhone right here. There's plenty of room on my desk for both.
Yeah, where's your Windows phone?
I don't have my Windows phone anymore. I miss the Windows phone. I would rather have Windows Phone than Android. It
was the developer's favorite platform,
Yeah. Yes. Anyway, but yeah. So I think like Clancy must have done this like really late at night or something, where he's like really tired, because I don't think that page is used anywhere else.
That's why I said the current view too, because I know view is sort of the typical nomenclature all over Comet for what you're dealing with. I don't think there's any page references really anywhere.
Yeah. And like this has always been one of the things that it's been like this big topic of conversation around Xamarin Forms for a while, is like MVVM is kind of the way that you want to develop good apps with Xamarin Forms, but they confuse the hell out of everything with like you have a page and then you have a view, and then like so it's like what is, like, people don't understand anything.
I'm gonna switch just because I think it's worth kind of showing here. And this is like, especially if you're somebody who's done some Xamarin Forms work before and hasn't really seen Comet, I think it's worth showing this, because this is like, I don't know, to me, what you're describing is what I've had to describe hundreds of times in training. The difference of like, well, you have a page, you have a layout, and then you have views. And it's like, okay, well, a layout's really also a view, and a page kind of also is a view, but they're very different in every aspect, whereas like here, if we take a look at,
and they're all visual.
They're all visual elements.
Right? Like,
yes. I didn't want to get into that side of it, but yes, but they don't react the same way, right? Whereas,
I actually kind of defer to the visual element a little bit in some of my trainings, though, because ultimately, if it's a visual element, it's a view.
Right. Yeah. At the end of the day, it is something that is being, if it's a visual element, just means that it's something that's going to be slapped into the user interface somewhere. The hierarchy of where it goes or something like that is unknown at that level, but it's something going in.
You can attach. If it's a visual element, you can attach a view model to it, plain and simple.
Exactly. Yeah, that's when you get your binding context, I think, is it there one level earlier?
Well, no, because before a visual element, you have element, and then before element, you have bindable object, which is actually where the binding context comes in. Yeah.
But yeah, it's like, look at how much of this work have we done, and it's still like, I live in it almost day in and day out, and it's still difficult to just like conceptualize. Whereas, like I was going to show here quick on Comet, you've got your we'll say like, me see if I can get Visual Studio to comply. We've got our main page. It's a material sample. I want to click happy. So I've got like my main page for what this application is, for this Comet application. And you'll see it's just declared as a view, just a regular Comet view. If we were to drill into anything, like any of these sub pages, I guess I'll just go back to clip sample 1 since I've got that open. It itself is a view. But the cool part about it then is the content inside of it. So in the Comet world, when you want to get this thing to draw out or render out the content for, I'll say like the current page or current screen that you're on in your application, that itself is also just a view. All these other things are just views. They might be specialized views like a vertical stack or an image or something like that, but they're all just views, which is super cool because from like a layout perspective, you don't have to think about, okay, like what is my very specialized thing that I need to use here? Is it if we go back to the Xamarin Forms world, is it a content page that I use right now? Or, like in a content page is weird because a content page can only have one view inside of it, which is then it's like, well, then it's a layout, but like here it's just massively simplified, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I think probably the only thing that gets a little confusing sometimes is like, okay, well, I have like this tab view, but the tab view kind of has to be like a root, like conceptually it's like the page that you're looking at, right? Like,
yeah.
So it's not like a tab control where, you can drop this in and then you could maybe have like, so you have like a vertical stack and then, you put a tab control in it and then you put something below it. Like, so that part gets a little confusing sometimes.
And I know like here, like we've got, like here's the tab view, right? So for example, like the tab view, you put like just views inside of it, so the views inside of it end up becoming the tabs, which is weird. It's not weird. It's just different, right? It's not like saying like you have a tab controller and then you add children to it, right? You're just saying like, here's a new one, here's a new one. But I love the simplicity of it. Like this is so,
but you are kind of adding children to it just in the way that you're doing that.
You're not like you're implicitly doing it, not like explicitly like adding a child is kind of what I mean there. Yeah, but I
always hate explicitly doing it.
Yeah, and that's what I was gonna say. Like you have to learn this little bit, just sort of as I add things to the body, they become the child views inside of it, right? But it's like just way cleaner. Yeah, like the explicit stuff helps, I think, like a beginner, just to conceptualize it and to get it. Oh, like I see, I'm adding this thing in. I'm very manually doing it. But once you get past that, and it's usually that learning curve is, it's there. Don't get me wrong. But once you get past that, the initial training wheels that provides to you or whatever kind of becomes, in my opinion, a little less relevant, where I get a few pages in or something and I kind of got the ropes of this. Something like this code just makes you kind of rip, and you don't have to worry about all that. You don't have to worry about some of that syntax and stuff. Is it like .children.add? Just forget about it. You just make your view and you just throw them in here immediately and you're good to go, which is pretty cool.
Definitely. Yeah, no, I mean, I really do like the Comet paradigm. It does speed you up quite a bit, for sure.
Do love it. Where were we taking a look at here on the Hail Bop? I'm trying to think what else we might have in here. Anything else you could think of outside on? I know we've kind of gone through some navigation, some logging.
Yeah. Let me think here. So there was something I was kind of explaining to you a little bit yesterday when we were briefly going over it, and that's the iView configuration. So this is actually a kind of an interesting concept.
Where is that located?
It's under views.
Views? Oh, okay.
Yes.
Got it.
So, the iView configuration is kind of like this very interesting abstract concept that's in here as well, and kind of by default I don't do anything to the view at all, so it's just we created a view.
There you go.
Have a good day.
Congratulations. Right? Yeah.
We do now. But if you wanted to implement this in your Comet application, you could do stuff like if there was like that task where you're like, hey, I just on every single app I'm doing, I want on iOS, I want to have the safe
Yep.
spaces. So automatically
Yep.
do that. Or if you have some sort of business logic where maybe you have like a marker interface or something, like you could just apply certain code to every view or to certain views um, right here without having to explicitly do it in all of those different views. Like you can just simplify everything.
So for these view configurations, is this like a one-to-many type of interface that you could implement out there? Like, could you have multiple view configurations? Is that the idea, or?
No, you're only going to have like one view configuration. So the view configuration gets used by the navigation service. So when it creates a new view, it's actually going to pass the view into the view configuration
Nice.
configure method.
So then you would just put your logic in there then to say, okay, here, apply, like you were saying, like for iOS, apply my spacing so that things are actually padded out appropriately on like a newer iOS device.
Exactly.
Nice.
Exactly.
And keep
So,
that in,
you know,
sorry, and then I was gonna say, and then that keeps it outside of your like view code. So instead of having to have that written in every single view that you create and remember to put that in every single view that you create, you kind of have this one nice consolidated place to have all that logic.
Yeah. And this could be something too where like you have that application delegate that you pass in to the start method, right? But you could do something where when you do this, like you make it virtual in your net standard project, right? And then you have just an override on your platform level that says, hey, register like the iOS view configuration. And so that way you're passing it in for iOS and now you're doing some customizations for that platform.
Which is awesome too, because then you could still have that call back into maybe the base implementation or something else, if you have some shared code there, and then extend it out further if you need to.
Exactly.
Yeah, love that. That's awesome. Yeah, because and I think I think that fits in really well with sort of some of the stuff that Comet's doing and kind of keeping things lightweight, keeping it sort of lean in a way, I would say, where a lot of the UI framework, or the UI setup and a lot of the component setup, again, if we take a look just at a sample page, you could see like this is the whole setup for a tabbed page, and to be able to remove some of that like crufty code of do X, Y, and Z on each thing, and just sort of have it in that one nice consolidated place, I think is pretty awesome.
Definitely. So, yeah, I mean, it's not the kind of thing that we can talk about for hours and hours on this just because it's intentionally lightweight by design, right? Like, like, okay, here you go. I mean, it's pretty simple, pretty straightforward. I mean, maybe certain things will grow over time. The only, I guess like the only other thing would be that there is this interface there, kind of like right next to iComet app, called iRegister Views, and when you look at that, there's nothing there. Like there is no implementation. It's purely a marker interface. So if you're really lazy like I am, you can just slap autoregister views on your application delegate. And then you don't even have to say register view A, register view B. It's just going to do everything by default.
Will it comb your code and look for certain types of objects then and just register them for you? Is that kind of the idea?
Yeah. It'll just anything that inherits from type view is going to it'll register. Be like, cool.
Being a lazy developer is being a good developer. So, right?
Yeah. I would have to double check this. It's been a while since I wrote it. I believe I did write some logic in there that if it's in the controls namespace, it'll get ignored. That was like the only exception, because I figure if you create something that's in a controls namespace, like obviously it's still going to inherit from view, but you probably like
it's like a reusable component as opposed to like a full page kind of idea, right?
Exactly. But definitely like anywhere else, I don't care.
Yeah, sure. That's pretty sweet.
Like I'm not I'm terrible with other languages. Like, it's funny. Like, I know all these programming languages. I've lived, 20 minutes from Mexico all my life, and I still can't speak Spanish.
Sure.
you know, but if but I do know, because I've worked obviously with people in like Spanish speaking countries, and like I've had some of them that are like, like as a requirement we have to have this table name be in Spanish.
Sure.
Like, it cannot be
Right.
in English, or like, so like there are certain things. It's like, okay, well, if you want your namespace to be whatever that is in whatever your language is, cool. I'm not gonna stop you from
Right.
doing that. It's just gonna work.
Very cool.
So,
yeah, I think this is super exciting. I mean, I know we've been talking about this, and we took a quick look at this yesterday. But I mean, I think stuff like this too, I'm excited enough as is about Comet, and then to have somebody like you start building out some of these sort of plumbing and framework things to to help. Honestly, like somebody like me to get up and running a little bit faster, to even to take out and abstract some of the little stuff, I mean, and Comet's, like I said, it's fairly straightforward. I feel like, but even just this stuff to standardize and sort of flatten out everything even more is super exciting to see, and it's something that I think it'll be a great start for everybody out there. So, and I know I posted the link out in the chat earlier, and I could probably I could probably get the link out there too on the Twitch video and stuff as well. I know it's still early. I know you literally just posted this public this morning. Is that right? Yeah.
Yes.
So,
yeah. So, and like it's not ready for anything. Like when I go, okay, it might be fun to start playing with. I'll put out a preview for people to play around with. Definitely be pretty interesting. The one other thing, actually, I was kind of surprised nobody brought it up. But one other thing that I probably should mention is, like, if you remember in the navigation interface, there was all of one method.
Sure.
And so if you pay attention to that, you might have noticed that it only handles navigation
Sure, right.
one direction.
Well, you don't ever go back in apps, Dan. You just go forward only.
Yes. So there is a reason for that, and that is when I first started writing this, Clancy actually forgot to add a pop method to his navigation, so I didn't have a way to go back.
Hey, it's forward looking. Our new apps don't need. We don't need to live in the past. We just need to go forward into the future. I think I pulled down the code. I'm pretty sure I saw that in there now. I can't remember where that is in here, but I'm pretty sure that's all in there at this point in time now.
Oh yeah. No, it is all in there. I just haven't gone in to update that, but that will definitely change for sure. Like, there will be a some sort of pop in there.
It's definitely one of those things. Knowing myself, if I were building this out, I would have done the same thing. Like, nah, for me writing my test app, I just need to go forward. I don't need to care about back navigation a ton. At least from like a programmatic perspective. Maybe I'll just let the platform figure it out for the moment. Just let me get in and do the fun stuff, and then I'll figure out all the modal handling and back navigation handling and all the other stuff that is way more involved and not as fun.
Yes. Well, like there's a certain level of, like, people kind of forget. It's like, okay, you're in the trenches, like, getting everything done. And, like, as I recall talking to Clancy, I think he actually had everything wired up from the platform level. He just forgot to expose the API.
Yeah, sure. Also, again, sounds about right.
It's like, I was like, if I had died for every time I've done that, right?
You get in, you're writing that plumbing code, and you're like, I just might as well just write it all out here too, and then just totally forget to glue it up. I've done that more times than I would care to admit. So.
Yeah. I mean, I just had that on the mobile build tool stuff. I was doing some tests. I'm like, why am I not getting any of this awesome, like, image handling stuff? Like, why is none of that firing? And, like, I wrote all the code to process images on build, and then I forgot to add the task into the build pipeline.
Everything was there, but nothing was ready to go, essentially, right? Yeah. Perfect.
But yeah, that'll actually be exciting. So I mean, you'll have a lot of different options for sure. Like from some of like what Clancy was talking about yesterday, he was talking about actually doing it where you have like a single unified like net standard library that kind of defines everything in your app, like including image assets and icon and all that. And then kind of having Comet maybe do the like the heavy lifting of taking those assets and now processing it for Android, processing it for iOS, and then
that should definitely be doable. I mean, that's like for Aurora, that's exactly what we do, where we've got because of all the cool stuff that comes with Skia Sharp for image handling. Like you could just put SVG libraries in as like an embedded resource in your shared code. And then, like if you're running on high pixel density iOS, I could just say like, oh, just go and generate these PNGs and save them off to disk at start, at first start or at first request. And as a developer, like, God, especially with having to deal with all these different devices and stuff like that, you've got your regular image, then your at 2x and at 3x, and then on Android, you've got your dash triple X HDPI or whatever. So if you could just, having that as a first class thing, or if we could just throw, and it should be easily achievable, we're just throw SVGs in and let it figure itself out at runtime is phenomenal,
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm doing something a little bit different for mobile build tools where, you can take all of your images and like dump them into folders. There's even some logic that you can do in there where you can conditionally add folders like, so like if you're doing a debug build or, if you're building for iOS or Android or something, like you can conditionally have like these folders that have additional assets, and you can do things like, you have like your common folder that has your app icon, but then you have a debug folder that has a
a different icon on top of it or something like it, like it says like debug on it or something.
Well, not even necessarily a different icon, but you can just have like the transparent overlay that says debug or something like that, right? And now at build, so you don't even have to like tell your graphic artist, hey, give me the icon and then put like a debug over it. You can just get like some debug whatever
generated stuff,
and exactly, some developer generated thing, and at build it'll actually take it, it'll do the overlay and generate the icon, and it puts everything into the temporary output, that little like object folder, that everybody's like, what is the object folder?
In an OBJ, they're just there to cause me trouble, right? Yeah.
Exactly. But it puts everything in there, so nothing gets added to source control. And it does it all intelligently, so it's only going to fire one time or if there's an update to handle something. And then it just gets automatically processed into your application.
That's awesome.
So it's just really about like, looking at Git does not like binary files like images.
Sure, totally.
So let's try to minimize how many of them we're tracking. And it's just a pain in the butt, right? Like I have a image, one, that's it. I don't care about all these different resolutions. Like let
some tool
other
figure it out. Yeah.
Exactly. And so the tooling all figures it out and generates exactly the resources that you need, where you need them. So it's really a fantastic little enhancement. I think people are really going to love it.
That sounds awesome, actually. Is that a DevOps plugin, or where does that exist? Is that...
That's going to be in the Mobile Build Tools 2.0. So there's a lot of stuff going there. I'll probably have to do another stream on that at some point. But thanks to Kazoo, he's helped me like really do this, because like when I did Mobile Build Tools originally, like I had to learn MS Build. Like there's not really, there are no good resources to learn it.
You can go and look at the source code for like, different parts of monodevelop or things like that to kind of get a handle on it, or wherever you could just come across somebody calling it, It's like a GitHub search for MS Build and see what you could find,
Exactly. And it's one thing when you're talking about like, you just have like the targets file and you're creating some task or something, or a target in there. But then like when you have like these compiled tasks that you're building, and now you're using them in those targets, it's like, well, how do you even debug all of that? Like, I can run unit tests, of course, but at the end of the day, like, I need to validate that these are working correctly in a build pipeline. And so like he actually was showing me some stuff where you can use like system diagnostics debugger, is attached. And if it's not attached, then you go, hey, we want to launch it.
Oh, sure.
And so that gets really interesting, where I can now take my whole sample app that I'm trying to validate, and it'll actually launch another instance of Visual Studio with the code. And I can sit there and line by line debug
I would
it.
love to see this. This sounds awesome. Like I've used like debugger is attached just to see like am I currently in a debug session or whatever, but I've not like launched a new instance and stuff. That would be that's pretty kick-ass actually.
Yeah, it's pretty legit. Like it's time consuming, and Visual Studio creates like all of these file locks. So
Sure.
I end up having to like close down both instances, and then I have to, then I have to like go open a new instance and open up mobile build tools and fix the one line that was broken, and then generate a new
Restart
build.
the whole thing again, right? Yeah. It's incredible that when you see some of this code and see how these apps are built, and you're like, how the hell did anybody actually get this done? The build cycle on this is forever, So that sounds cool, though. Yeah, I mean, if you're ever doing something like that, or if you're going to stream that or anything, obviously just let me know.
Yeah, I probably should. I mean, I haven't, because I'm like, well, this is kind of boring stuff. But it's also it's content
is fascinating to me, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I mean, like, nobody is talking about that kind of stuff, right? Like, I've joked for a while. It's like, how funny is it that you have a conference from Microsoft called MS Build, and the one thing that they do not talk about at MS Build is MS Build.
They probably talk about like PowerShell, I'm sure, at some point in time. Like it's about as close as they probably get. But
yeah, like, I mean, they talk about Visual Studio, they talk about all these things, right? They don't talk
hilarious.
about like, it's kind of like Fight Club, right?
Can't talk about it, right? Yeah. You should send that to them. Let them know, hey guys, you need a session on this.
Yeah, they do. I think a lot of people could benefit. I mean, like, I think back to, like, especially working on mobile build tools. I often, like, I think back to my early days as a .NET developer, and I'm like first learning about C# development. And like I'd right click on the project, and I'm like what's this, like after build?
What
I don't like things? Why would you? Why would you ever, like, what I want to do on build? I want it to build, right?
They're like arcane knowledge. Like who uses these things?
Yeah.
And I know, like, for tools developers, every tools developer I've ever talked to, like for example, like in the Xamarin world, like Matthew Robbins, like how did you get started building mFractor, and sort of how did you figure it out? And he's just like, a lot of trial and error, man. Just you get in, you bang through it until you take one step forward and figure it out, and there is like, I think that there would be some interest in that, because I know, like myself, that the biggest hurdle for me to ever go in and do something there is just like, where the hell do I even start? Like what do I do? I think that'd be cool.
Well, it's a good thing I don't already have enough streaming content set up for the next 4 months.
Put something else on the docket, dude. Come on.
So yeah, I mean, actually, like I just released a tutorial for Prism on YouTube this week. So I have like these short little tutorials that I'm going to be doing like every week now. So I have 4 months worth on the docket right now.
Are those published on your? Are those published out there?
Yeah. Let me get you the URL here.
So yeah, if there's anything you want to plug, please do.
Yeah, definitely. What? Like I'm still working on the. It's a new channel, so I don't have enough subscribers yet to do like the whole like youtube.com/Dan Siegel. So please go and subscribe at this funky URL, so that way I can get enough subscribers to do that.
The one UC0. Let me see. UC0. Yep. Cool. Got it. Posted it.
Yeah.
Awesome. Where else can we find anything else that you'd want to plug?
I'm trying to think here.
Is your GitHub or Prism's better?
Mine is better. Yeah, mine is better. I mean, I guess like the one thing I would maybe say is, if people really like what they're getting, like all this free content, definitely please consider sponsoring me on GitHub too, because that does help, kind of pay for some of the time, because it is a lot of time that I'm putting in to kind of help the community and do all these things. So I do like to eat every once in a while.
Crazy.
Yeah, crazy.
Listen, as a developer, I expect everything to be free in high quality. I don't know how it gets to me. I don't care how the sausage was made. I just want to know that it's high quality, that you're going to support it 24/7, and that I pay you absolutely nothing for it. So.
Ouch! Ouch!
How correct me if you think that this is wrong, but I know like whenever I have like a training or a presentation or something like that, I've had like people in the past say, oh, it's just like a 1 hour presentation. How long can it take to prepare? And I'm like, a 1 hour presentation is like a whole like 40 plus hours worth of putting it together and writing samples and cleaning it up and making sure it fits for the time and doing all this stuff. So, I mean, just if forever, you got to like keep that in mind in library development and all the cool stuff that I know that you and a lot of the other MVPs are involved with. Something like this Twitch stream is pretty easy to do because it's stuff that we've already dumped time into. It's a little bit more straightforward to do, I guess, but even this takes time with setup and going over that. But like every published piece of video, every piece of code that's written, documentation and videos in particular and presentations require just a tremendous amount of effort. So, just keep that in mind for anybody that's using stuff or using libraries and things like that.
Definitely.
If it's not coming from, big corp name A, the library, it's probably being built by people like Dan who are dedicating their own time and their own interest to put these things together. So, even just like $5 to like, buy a latte or do something like that goes a heck of a long way.
Definitely.
So do feed your developers.
I mean, the reality of it is like, I mean, if I had, even 1/10 of the consumers, of everything that I have going out there, doing $5 a month, I could be hiring people to write docs and do all kinds of crazy things. Like, it does help. It goes a long, long way.
Yeah. Anything helps, and we do it, I'm sure you, just like me, I mean, I'm not getting paid for anything that I do along these lines. I honestly just love doing this stuff, so
yes.
It's not as if I'm going to stop doing it, or I'm sure that you wouldn't just stop doing it. But it's a great, it's a great incentive to be able to continue to do these things without the pressure of, because all of us, I know you work as a consultant as well, just like me.
Yes.
I've always got the balance of I need to be out there doing work, and that means the more stuff that I'm out there doing outside of community things just means I have less time to dedicate to those things, So
yes. So I mean, it is the kind of thing where the more people that do step up and help sponsor myself and other open source maintainers that are out there as well, the more time that we have to dedicate to these activities and the more that we can do. The videos take a lot of time, like you mentioned. So it's like, people might look and go, oh, okay, so you released a 5-minute video. Well, how long did that take you? A couple of hours.
It was
actually,
half a day,
yeah.
And like,
there goes half a day of productivity for a 5-minute video. It's like,
And I'd say too, like, if you feel like you're not in the position to, or you can contribute financially, but you are good at reading code and writing docs, that goes just as far or further, quite honestly. So,
Definitely.
if you feel like you're not, if you're more of a novice and you're not sure how to contribute, for me personally, one of the best ways that I've ever learned how to do any of the programming that I do is by having to learn how to prepare it for a presentation or prepare it for training. So if there's something that I don't know super well, maybe if it's like a piece of forms or something, years ago, or a piece of C# code that maybe you use a little bit, but you're not sure how it works in and out, helping write the docs for that stuff or prepare something that to teach other people means that you organically kind of gain this knowledge that that's inside and out on that. So, I mean, if like I said, if you feel like you can't financially contribute, just being able to get in there and take a little bit of your time and help, help maintain, help maintain an open source project goes a long way. Burnout, open source burnout's for real. And at some point in time, if, you just kind of want to walk away from some things, and it's like, you feel bad doing that, but sometimes you don't have another option, so.
Oh yeah, I mean, the burnout level that I see amongst a lot of open source maintainers is just really crazy.
And just a little thing like goes a long way, man. Like I said, somebody who steps up. I've seen it happen time and time in the community where things are starting to stagnate, and somebody with a lot of energy just happens to come out of nowhere and either just helps the project go further, helps. So it's sometimes those things. It's like a big boulder, and you just need somebody to kind of get it rolling again. And once it's rolling, it's hard to stop again, but you just kind of need to be, you need somebody to help do that. And so, like I said, yeah, even if you can't financially contribute, spending a little bit of your time helping out there. And I'm sure that you don't have anything that you need documented on the Prism side or, like issues maintained or anything like that, right? You've got that all taken care of yourself, right? Yeah. 100%. Perfect.
We're good. No.
Awesome. So yeah. Very cool, man. Well, with that, anything else you'd like to plug? Anything else you'd like to throw a shout out at for today?
No. I mean, I know you were asking about XAMDev Summit earlier. I still cannot tell you the exact. But
where could I go to find out if I wanted to?
Well, I would say that the best thing you could do is just go to xamarindevelopersummit.com, and if you have not already signed up for the mailing list, be sure to kind of do that. And then as soon as we have more information that we can share publicly, we definitely will do that. I'm kind of planning on the CFP opening up in the next maybe 2 weeks, I would say. So it should be open this month.
Awesome. It was awesome conference. I can't say enough good things. It was like being at the old Evolve conferences, Definitely, at some of the Microsoft conferences, you're not going to get a deep mobile, focus and stuff like that. And so having this again was awesome. Thank you so much for putting this together for the community. I know feedback that I heard was tremendous. Everybody that I know was there really seemed to love it. So presentations were awesome. It was all cool all the way around. So
yeah, I heard your presentation was awesome as well.
Sweet. Wait, you weren't in there? Come on, man. No.
That was the sad part, as the conference organizer, I didn't get to go to any of the sessions except for the ones that and really the only things I could do was like a panel.
Sure.
Because that was all I had time.
Nothing that requires an insane amount of super prep for it, Yeah.
No, I mean, I literally, I took Rodney, and like 5 minutes before it began, I'm like, hey, Rodney, you want to sit on this panel?
I saw you as a ghost. You were like one of those cartoons where you have like the little, like, the outline of like dust around them as they're scooting around everywhere. That was basically how I had seen you out there. So awesome. But, so super cool. Yeah. So keep an eye out for that. But it should be an awesome conference to go to. So.
Definitely. That's the goal anyway, try to have, this one major event that the community can come together from a worldwide perspective. Yeah. Like I know, like, especially right now in Europe, there's like, some people are like, hey, well, we want to have like this European thing. But it's like, you're not really trying to fulfill the spirit of what XAMDev Summit is all about if you're focused on like a region.
Right.
Like, we want to bring developers from all over, because like it shouldn't be about being an American conference or a North American. Like, we want people from everywhere. We want people from here. We want people from Africa, from the Middle East, from Asia, from Australia, all coming together and sharing their knowledge and their expertise and ideas, so that way the entire community can move forward together. You know,
it's awesome.
And,
so you're saying it's in
yeah.
Europe this year, is what you're saying?
No. I'm not saying you need a passport or that you don't need a passport,
Sure.
but
but maybe in the future. Yeah, maybe not this year, but maybe in the future.
Yes.
Awesome.
But you should be prepared for a good time either way.
Awesome. Definitely. Well, thanks again for joining here today, man. This is awesome. I look forward to see everything that we got going out there with Hailbop. I'm going to be keeping an eye on that and keeping an eye on Comet here. And yeah, if you ever got some time you want to join back in on again, that'd be awesome.
Sounds good. Well, thank you for having me.
Thanks, man. Have a good weekend. I'll talk to you.
All right. Hey, you too.
All right, and everybody else for joining who joined the stream, thanks for joining on today. I'll probably sign off here. It's probably a good point. I'll let me double check and see some of the chat. I thought I was keeping an eye on that, but see a few comments, but nothing big. Hopefully this worked out for everybody. I know it was something a little bit different, but working with Dan, chatting with Dan, he's an awesome resource out there for anybody who's ever used Prism or anything like that. Dan's put a ton of work into that as well. So hopefully you found that to be pretty interesting content or whatever. As always, if you have any questions, thoughts, comments, concerns, whatever, you could get to me on Twitter at Michael Stonis, or drop me a comment somewhere else. You could find me online in a bunch of different places. There's only one other like Michael Stonis, but that's a different story for a different day. So I'll probably sign off here as well. Hope everybody has a great rest of your weekend if you're watching this live. Otherwise, hope you have a great rest of your day.